Season 2, Episode 6.
This is UX Podcast. I'm James Royal Lawson.
And I'm Per Axbom.
And we are two humans here to help you push the boundaries of how user experience is perceived and boost your confidence in the work you do. We're based in Stockholm, Sweden, and you're listening to us all over the world, from Honduras to New Zealand.
Did you change the intro? I didn't even recognize that.
I might have tweaked a few words in this.
You might have, yeah. Kim Goodwin is a well-known design leadership guru and really needs no further introduction, but we will try. Kim is a professional when it comes to helping organizations build their internal design capabilities through coaching and organizational change management.
She's led design and research projects in aviation, retail, communication, financial services, consumer, enterprise, automotive, IT, and many other industries. She's also regularly photographing wildlife in places with no internet access. So you should really check out her Instagram account. You will see lots of polar bears and other animals that she's seen over the years.
It's just beautiful. And this is the 5th time we've had the opportunity to chat to Kim on the show.
And in our previous conversations with Kim, we've discussed, and I'm going to do another list here, journey mapping, organizational culture, decision systems, and design confidence.
And today's conversation with Kim was recorded after a talk about design and leadership lessons from her work in healthcare at From Business to Buttons, which is a conference that is held every May here in Stockholm, Sweden.
And if you want me, James, and Per as part of your next conference, event, or in-house training, we are offering also workshops, talks and courses to inspire and help you grow as individuals, teams and organizations. Just get in touch by emailing us at hey@uxpodcast.com. Kim, healthcare designer Kim. So you've come to the realization that you've spent 60% of your career working with healthcare design. And when I heard you say that, I kind of straight away thinking about, oh yeah, it's the whole "what will I be when I grow up" question, and you've kind of got there, kind of.
Well, that implies that I'm grown up, which I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
My phrasing, sorry, you're right. Yeah.
But yes, I suppose that's true.
It's the self-reflection that kind of intrigued me and started to make me think as well about that kind of, yeah, okay, if I'm honest, what have I spent 60% of my career doing? So I was a bit curious about, how did that process go for you? Did you kind of like really understand that all along, or was there a moment when that realization struck?
I've always known that I enjoyed healthcare and that I had done quite a bit of healthcare, but I never really thought about it. I never thought of myself as a healthcare designer until somebody called me one. And I was saying to some UX friends, I said, I don't really know why they're calling me that. I'm not a healthcare designer. And actually it was Jared Spool, and he said, aren't you?
Oh, right.
I said, well, I guess. And so that just made me sit down and think, well, how much healthcare have I done? And I started listing out all those projects and all those clients, and oh yeah, okay, I guess that's a fair description of me. I don't think I'm exclusively that, right? But it certainly is a label that fits.
Exactly, the thing of hunting for a label, which as an industry, we've got a kind of reputation with labels and having issues with labels. So it's kind of interesting to come to that realization. Well, I've worked with a thing, and I can group the thing.
Yeah.
But maybe what the thing actually is only half the story.
Yeah, I think I probably resisted the label just because it feels limiting, right?
Yeah,
and it sort of implies, well, I don't know how to design other things when I've worked in lots of other fields too, and so. I think the skills are just so transferable. But, as I reflected on it, actually, to put together this talk, I realized just how much of how I think has been shaped by working in healthcare in some values and some procedures and principles that I don't know that you'd see everywhere. And so, it seems useful to acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I think there is the transferable skill thing is really important. And you mentioned enterprise design today, and I've done a fair bit of enterprise design, and I've realised over the years I actually enjoy enterprise design more than some of the commercial design and outward-facing design. And I don't know if that's just because there is something something about the nitty-gritty of an enterprise design project that is rewarding, or whether I actually have just spent more time doing it. So I've you've collected that insight and experience from being submersed in that particular label or angle of design.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy enterprise design too, and I think that for me, it's about the intellectual challenge, right? In my experience, the more complicated the design problem is, the more fun it is to solve. And maybe that makes me perverse and weird, but I just enjoy the complexity of it. And what's fun in consulting is you go and you learn new domains, right? And I can have a cocktail party conversation about all kinds of really weird things. And, I know enough about them to be dangerous, but it's kind of fun. I mean, I don't really do hands-on design that much anymore, but over the years, I've definitely gotten to know lots of weird little details, some of which I'd rather I didn't know. Like, I don't necessarily want to know certain things about how the airline industry handles this or that, or, what happens with bodies in nursing homes, or, there's lots of little things that maybe I could have done without knowing that.
One thing that struck me was when you talked about healthcare design, and talking about it from the perspective of, well, you're dealing with life and death, but then also the realization of how that is transferable to just about anything. I mean, even to enterprise design, because it's about human well-being in the end, and everything we do has to do with exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that, healthcare is not perfect in lots of ways, and I don't think most people would point to healthcare as design innovation, although I think that's actually an unfair characterization in a lot of ways. But certainly on the software front, they're not really known for sexy things. And yet I think that focus on safety, that sort of, frankly, kind of boring stuff of applying a discipline to what you're doing and applying a rigor to what you're doing, there's no reason that we can't take some of that without maybe the unnecessary bureaucracy part of it, and just get better at what we do. Because frankly, a safety critical industry like healthcare or aviation or any place else where there's a lot at stake, they do have those kinds of procedures for a reason, and they are a bit slow and methodical for a reason. And I think that in software, we're so used to that Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things that we are breaking things. And I think there's something to be learned from, okay, what happens when a lot is at stake? What can we learn from that?
The move fast and break things there. I'm thinking about the healthcare design and some of the examples you've shown is where you're looking at the design of some kind of end user device. A healthcare professional is using some kind of device or interface in relation to the patient. And when you think about breaking things, and you've shared some stories about this too, is that in healthcare there's a lot of systems with integrations, and the complexity of the integrations, in my experience by listening to some of the stories, is it's there where it's really fragile. I mean, you could fix the interface and do some good works there, but fixing the integrations.
Sometimes, I think the integrations are complicated, but honestly, the integration is often just a matter of, okay, we have a data sharing protocol we can use between these systems. It takes a little engineering effort to do. Certainly there's complexity there, but honestly, I think where the bigger gap is in configuration, not so much the integration, because, in any enterprise system, you've probably seen this, right? You have some sort of very flexible software package that gets installed, and it's meant to be configured. And if it were configured correctly, it actually could be pretty good. But people forget that, the way that you lay out that form or the information architecture you use of this or the settings you put there, people forget that part is interaction design.
Yeah.
And so that part is just done incompletely or done badly. And that's actually where a lot of the usability issues crop up.
Yeah, I've got experience where we've seen with enterprise products that organizations decline the configuration package of part of the deal of buying. Mm-hmm. It's crossed off the procurement list, so it's crossed off as a cost saver.
Right.
We'll go with defaults, or we'll figure it out ourselves. Whereas the cost benefit of taking that initial configuration package is almost certainly worth it, because then you will get that custom solution that you've bought.
Yeah, and I mean, having bought a few of those packages, I think that the configuration costs can look ridiculous. And I also know from experience that for some companies, the configuration is actually where all their profit is for those enterprise companies. So, sometimes I wonder, is there an incentive maybe to be complicated to configure? But even so, what is the number? Something like 50% of enterprise software implementations fail in the first year. It's really not surprising, because people they treat them like, we're installing a new phone system, instead of, we're looking at something that touches all of our processes and maybe even some cultural things. And they're not really treating it that way. And that's where you get this notion of digital transformation, right? That really looks a little bit more holistically at culture and not just, let's plug in a piece of software.
Exactly.
So then, so we look at the human cost as well of some of these. If you don't do the integration because it's expensive and so on, then you're also neglecting to look at the long-term impact of that on your co-workers, on the end users, ultimate end users.
But also in a sense then, because there is a lack of accountability, which was one of the major topics of your talk. I've worked with healthcare services for a bit more than 10 years. Don't call myself a healthcare designer yet.
You will someday.
You need to do the maths.
Exactly. And I've worked on so many platforms, and I think this is where all my interest in ethics started, where I realized I'm building all these things where anything that goes wrong, nobody comes to me, but the doctor gets blamed because something happens to the patient. And they are accountable for something that I built. And that realization was like, it can't be like this.
Yeah.
But it is like this. This is what we have. And that needs to change. But how do we change it?
Yeah.
And that doctor themselves, they don't have any choice about whether they accept the accountability or not for what you have been part of delivering to them.
Right. Well, sometimes they have a choice about whether to adopt a system. Not like a hospital information system, because that they don't have any more choice about than anybody else does. But when it comes to, for example, there's a class of products called digital therapeutics, right, where you have, say, a mobile phone app that is designed literally to treat a disease and goes through a clinical trial and gets cleared as a prescription product, right? Or even just a sort of slightly lesser degree of approval, right? That is not a prescription product, but a product they might refer you to. But they're very aware of their accountability. And so if they have any questions about that product, they're not going to adopt it. They're not going to suggest that their patients use it. So if you're making medical devices, you're very aware that all of those physicians or all of those psychologists or whoever your sort of clinician audience is, that they are gatekeepers to adoption. Electronic medical records are a different story, because they're sort of coming in through another path.
And one big aspect of your talk was also the traceability, which would mean to be held accountable, you also need to be able to show your work, why it happened.
Yep.
And when you went through that, it seems so simple and obvious that we should be doing this. We should understand why a button is placed the way it is, why we have that text over there. There should be like a way to trace back to how that decision was made and who made it, essentially. But we're not even getting close to that in most projects.
Yeah.
And people start arguing about, how did this happen? Who decided this? And then they change it without understanding the reason and the potential high-risk situation people could be put in if they do change that.
Right. Yeah, and they may not understand all the reasons that change was made.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of interesting things in what you just said, right? So one is, in a traceable system, you can tell who made the decision and whether they were a person authorized or qualified to make that decision. So let's talk about that for a second. The way that teams work today, that's very hard to figure out, because who actually made that decision? And we would have to start having hard, awkward conversations about, well, who makes which kinds of decisions? And the project management within product teams is very seldom that explicit. It is in safety critical companies, right? But people do their racy diagrams of, people who are responsible and accountable and consulted and informed and who does what. And they get very formal about it. And I feel like software teams in general are just allergic to that kind of thing.
Well, it'd slow you down.
In theory, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Although in many companies, if you could point to a diagram and say, who's responsible for making this kind of decision? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to figure that out and have 6 meetings about it. So there are cases where it actually would speed you up.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is one interesting aspect of sort of more mature product development processes is, that's a big culture shift from sort of the Silicon Valley approach. So that's one bit, and I had completely forgotten what else I was going to say. What did you say?
Around
after?
traceability.
Oh, yeah. So who made the decision? And then if you look at why that decision was made, I think a lot of teams, if you pressed on it, couldn't articulate those reasons very well right now. Mm-hmm. I don't think the reasoning is always that clear.
I mean, I said to Per about hypothesis-based design. It was something I try to do with a lot of clients, is that push them to formulate actual hypotheses. And reflecting on it after talking to you or listening to you, and realize that is I'm using that as traceability.
Sure.
Because I'm making them think, because we've seen this evidence, then we're going to do this change, and we're expecting it to this to happen, and this is how we're going to know that, and we're aware that these people might get harmed in this way when we do it.
Yep. And the other thing that's implied in what you're saying there, which is not typically a thing you worry about in medical traceability, is what failed, right? So is there also a way that we can capture, just for learning, hey, here's the set of things that didn't work and why, and make those referenceable too? Because I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with the team. Oh, we tried that like 2 years ago and it didn't work, but I don't remember why. Right. And so what happens? Well, that team can't tell if that concept is broken or if it was just that implementation that was broken. And so they don't know, should we revisit this idea or should we just not go down that path? And teams waste a ton of time on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it's the insight generator. So it's coming to the new insights from the failures, so you can loop back into it again.
Yeah, I mean, there's a gigantic knowledge management problem in so many teams. I think big companies maybe don't have efficient systems for that, right? Maybe they have systems, but they're cumbersome and nobody uses them. Small companies, there's no system except, ask John because he's been here for 4 years and he probably knows.
Yeah, he remembers last time.
If somebody offers John a better paying job, whoop, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
So, in general, I can see people listening to this and they have these frustrations and they're thinking, well, I know all this, but people aren't listening to me. I'm a designer. I don't have a seat at the table. I don't have that kind of power. And something that you said, you didn't say it exactly like this, but we want to be treated as professionals, but we are not a profession.
Right.
And I don't think we talk about that enough.
Yep.
There's a reason we don't have power, because we haven't gone through certification processes. We don't have that kind of accountability.
Right. I mean, I think we all envision a world where we can say, well, just trust your design team to make this decision, right? And I hear that a lot from people. Well, shouldn't they just trust us as designers? And, when I'm talking with my clients, I can't honestly say to them with a straight face, oh, you should just trust your designers. Because the fact is, there's some people calling themselves designers who don't actually know what they're doing. And I know that sounds gatekeepish, right? And I don't mean it to be that, but I do think that, there are professions where you can know someone has a certain basic level of understanding. It certainly is not a guarantee that they will be competent, but it's better than guesswork. I was trying to help a client recently who is not a designer hire some designers into a small team, and they had no idea what they were looking for, right? So I offered to help screen candidates, but they said, you know what, we'll do the initial screening. You just interview them later. And so they handed me a set of people they had screened. I'm making air quotes here, and had me interview them. But, I could tell even before the interview that these people didn't actually understand a lot of basic usability principles, right? There was lots of really horrible form layout in their portfolios. There were big accessibility mistakes and stuff that I could have spotted in a 3-minute portfolio review with those people. So, it got me to thinking about the fact that there are tons of people hiring designers, whether as consultants or in teams, where they don't have experienced design leaders. How do they know they're getting good designers? They have no idea, right? They have no way to assess those skills. And so they're kind of looking and saying, oh, let me look at the Dribble portfolio. Oh, looks nice. And this person seems articulate and easy to work with. Okay, good. But they might be making design decisions based on what they like and not actually based on understanding ergonomics or cognitive psychology or anything. So, when I think about the Gen X designers, lots of us didn't necessarily come into the field with formal training and so on. So, I don't want to say, oh, well, we know what's right and we're perfect. And that certainly isn't the case, right? Lots of people cobbled together their design knowledge from reading the literature and learning this and that. And so there's plenty of spotty skills in older designers too. But I think that, at some point we have to be a bit more professional if we want to be treated as such.
Right.
I completely agree.
Yeah. But it's not an easy problem, though. I mean, who gets to decide what the bar is and how is that enforced? And should we really have the same expectation of somebody who's designing the video game versus the medical device? I don't think so.
You did mention about the hairdresser. I thought that was a really good metaphor, that you need a license to cut someone's hair.
Yeah.
Do you need one here?
I think so, yeah.
You do?
For the same reasons.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., right, it's about hygiene, right? You can pass along infections and so on and create health problems. And so, you have to have a license to cut hair. And that's generally not going to kill somebody. But I don't need a license to design medical devices that can kill people. And that's freaky.
That is freaky.
Yeah.
I mean, so straight away to get to that stage, though, I mean, design is a global thing.
Yeah.
We're talking to a global audience now on the podcast. And, but all these countries need to get to that point of working out how to license a credit and so on. I mean, when America's got its system for doing hairdressers and for doctors and so on, Sweden's got its system.
And worse than that, I mean, in the U.S. at least, it probably wouldn't happen at the federal level. It would probably happen at the state level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, most professions are actually licensed and managed at the state level. And some by government, some of the licensing is kind of an independent board, depending on the profession. So, it's complicated.
Here in Europe, it would presumably come at Europe level and then be implemented at country level. But
that would be a lot more coherent, right?
Yeah, but you'd still end up with 27 variations of the implementation. But but getting to that point of understanding on a policy level that we need this help to be professional.
Yeah.
I don't get the feeling that we're even on the start ramp of that.
No, I don't think we are. I don't think it's a conversation that we're having as an industry, really. And I wouldn't say that, we're going to get regulated tomorrow, but I think it'll happen at some point. I don't know when. I hope it happens at some point because, I mean, as a user of these things, I would certainly like to know that they are safe and competently designed. And I think that it would uplevel all of us as an industry to be able to say, you know what, you do have to be competent to some degree to do this stuff. But I mean, the same thing applies to our colleagues in software development. development and product management, right? I mean, they don't have that sort of professional credibility either. I don't think that they necessarily get the same sort of lack of credibility that designers get sometimes. So maybe it's a little bit less important there. But, when I think about a safety critical system, I want to know the engineers building that are also really good. And if I think about privacy considerations, don't we want to know that the people building that stuff actually know how to protect our data? It would be nice.
And loops us back to what we said about doctors signing off on giving their approval and things. I mean, it'd be nice if we had someone who could, stand for what we're producing and say, look, I'm the one who is licensed to basically say these designers, programmers, product managers, whatever, this team has actually delivered something which I can stand for.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be the legal front for that promise.
Yeah, I mean, there's this notion that someone is accountable, right? Like, if I hire a general contractor to work on my house, their license is accountable for everyone who's working under them, unless it's a licensed specialty, right? Same thing in a doctor's office. They're accountable for what happens in their office too. Some of those other people are licensed in their individual arenas too.
Exactly.
But in some ways, the physician is sort of loaning their authority, if you will.
So while we wait on that future to happen,
which may be a while if it happens.
I mean, you had some really good messaging at the end, at least when we talk about what can I do now, as learnings from your experience in healthcare when it comes to well-being and helping people thrive, and not focusing on preventing and solving problems. Just that.
Yeah. Although we need to certainly get better at that too. But I mean, it's a big to-do list, right? I'm not pretending I have answers to these things. More things to think about. But I think that we talk about usability and we talk about safety, and these are big, important issues. And yet, I don't really want to eat a meal that is salmonella-free and edible, because I guess that's a good minimum bar, but it's not attractive. It doesn't really make me want to go to that restaurant. I would much rather eat a meal that's delicious. And, I think that probably most of us got into design because we want to fill the world with better stuff. We want to make people's lives better in some way. And just usability can do that. I mean, I think it's important that we not underestimate how much impact we can have by just unsucking a government immigration form. That can be a really big deal. But, I think we should also be looking for opportunities to do even better than that, and to be surprisingly good and add an element of wonder and ease and yes, sometimes aesthetic beauty to what we do.
Beautiful.
Good point.
Thank you,
I think. Thank you, Kim.
All right. You're done with me. Excellent.
One thing I did after listening back to our chat with Kim is I started Googling the laws in Sweden to do with hairdressers.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. I sniffed a rabbit hole and I jumped in full body. So it turns out that there is no legal requirement to be a licensed hairdresser here in Sweden. No legal requirement.
Okay.
But there is an industry body who issue accreditation for hairdressers. And that's and that body does actually encourage, or that part of their work is to encourage people to get their hair cut at accredited or licensed hairdressers.
So I suppose that's a good example then of that's one path that would be possible, I guess, where you actually have an accreditation body where you are. Well, people are recommended that if you want to hire a designer, choose someone who is accredited from there. Yeah,
but what's interesting here though is, one thing is of course the difference from country to country in requirements. So America, there we learned that there is a requirement because of hygiene to be licensed. Here in Sweden, there's not a legal requirement. So globally, very different playing field just for hairdressing. And then though, if you're talking about the accreditation option, you've still got the situation where there needs to be a definition of what a hairdresser is.
Right, exactly.
and a body that then can represent that defined group of people.
And that feels like it's a little easier for a hairdresser than what a digital designer is.
On the surface, it definitely feels easier to create a group there.
Because you have the physical work. I mean, what makes, I guess, the digital complex a bit is that so much of it is virtual.
And overlapping him in different ways. That I suppose a hairdresser is performing a service, and like you've just said, it's a physical service carried out by a human on another human. Whereas we are producing digital products, we're producing digital services, and we're producing marketing information or campaigns. We're also producing but works of reference.
Right. So if a hairdresser was producing content on how you should cut your own hair and people get hurt following those instructions, that would be comparable.
And then I don't know how many hairdressers do research into cutting hair.
Yeah.
Or do they do? I guess they do testing.
I guess you would. You'd probably be interested in different types of styles. I guess you can have different specialties there as well.
Yeah. Oh, but it's the digital world does blur the edges though.
As you say, because if we talk about accountability and responsibility, it's about avoiding harm and holding someone accountable if something goes wrong. And there is traceability, of course, because the interaction with the hairdresser is there in the moment. Whereas in our case, the effects of what we produce and do can be far into the future and far away in the physical space as well.
Much more difficult to understand or to visualize, I guess, where who is responsible for what's happening, because there's so many different aspects included in it.
So many actors, so many people involved in different types of tiny decisions.
And decisions that they don't always realize they're making. I think Kim mentioned that about designers not always realizing what they're doing. And we see this a lot about this ignorance in our industry, not because ignorance is desirable or deliberate. I think it's again the overlapping and what you do, you don't realize what you're not doing, I guess.
But also there's not really someone appointed to be responsible. I think Kim posed the question, who's responsible for making this kind of decision? You want to know that even for a decision about where buttons are placed, because I guess you could take like a cookie pop-up as an example. Who is responsible for implementing that? That seems like something that someone realizes, we need this, and someone downloads a library and just puts it online. But who is actually responsible for the wording on those buttons? There should be someone appointed inside a company that you can always go to. You can look at an organization chart and say, oh, the person that's responsible for the buttons, it's this person. Just go to them.
Or you can look back in some kind of audit trail and see.
That would be amazing.
And this makes me think of our conversation. It's 8 years ago now, Pat, with Lisa Welshman, and who is the person when it comes to digital governance, and she talked with us back in architecting the information age, just about. It comes up again and again in our chat with her then about accountability, and being accountable for the things we do.
Right.
And she was talking in the context of doing our best work and being accountable for personally accountable. But there are layers to accountability, I guess. Like you have got that individual accountability to yourself.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Am I doing my best work?
Yeah.
But then you've got maybe compliance, legal compliance, or audit trail accountability within processes.
And it's interesting with when we talked about these healthcare systems. If I build something that a doctor has to use, but the doctor himself or herself cannot decide whether or not they use that system. We're victims of this all the time. If you work inside a company, there are so many tools that someone else chooses for me, tools that control me and my work, that I have no possibility of actually affecting. We always complain, for example, of course, in the UX industry about time reporting systems, things like that. We have to use them. But they hurt people. All these systems hurt people. But who can be held accountable? Is it the person who buys the system? Is it the person who designs the system? Is it the person who says that we cannot invest in the development of the system? Is it that someone in HR doesn't care to listen to our complaints? There are so many levels or touch points.
And yet, like if you got hurt by a door going into the building, then that would be easier to work out who's responsible.
Exactly.
Because the number of actors involved in it are less, and the trail of work would be shorter.
And I have to say, I mean, just hearing Kim say those words, lots of people are calling themselves designers but don't know what they're doing. This is a huge problem for us because it's so easy to go in and do design work and have it even look good and appear good, but not perform as well as it could if you actually did the right type of research and the right type of design.
I mean, you very easily fall into we get into the kind of what is a designer, but I suppose at the end of the day, we're creating things, and there needs to be accountability for what we're creating, and as well as understanding what we are creating.
Right.
Irrespective of what label we put on the job we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually thinking when I was listening back to the episode, maybe we don't need designers anymore, because we kind of when we talk about the UX industry, it's because we needed people who are experts in digital. But we really don't need experts who are in digital anymore in that sense, because everything is digital now. So all the professions just need a layer of digital on top of them. And so we keep doing what we've always been doing. We're just inside the digital space now.
Yeah. I mean, we've already moved from saying web to saying digital.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, they're transient words. You're right. I mean, ultimately, we're going to move beyond them.
Definitely. What have you chosen for recommended listening this time, James?
I was just going to say that's really, really easy. Just go back and listen to all our Kim shows. But then at the same time, we've started talking about Lisa Welshman.
Yes,
so I'm going to go, oh no, now you've got to listen to all the Kim ones and all the Lisa ones. Yes. But no, I'm going to stick to my guns and say, yep, all the Kim shows. So that's, and these are all series 1 or season 1. 93, 192, 221, and 262. There will be a link in the show notes that you click on to get to those. Or you can just doom scroll for ages wherever you are now, and eventually you will get to 93.
I mean, if you listen to all of those in a row, you will be so much smarter within a week.
Oh, God, yeah. Really. Perry, you should do it. We should do it.
We should do it, yes, definitely.
And also, if you would like to contribute to funding or producing UX Podcast, then visit uxpodcast.com/support. Or even easier is just email us and volunteer to help.
Remember to keep moving.
See you on the other side. Per, what's the difference between an oral thermometer and a rectal thermometer?
Well,
Don't start laughing. We haven't got to the punchline.
I don't know why I should be asking this, but James, what is the difference between an oral thermometer and a rectal thermometer?
The taste.
Oh, no.
Oh, dear.